Welcome back folks, my name is LastKnownMeal and today we're going to talk about the United States military in the world of Cyberpunk. I had some questions on what happened with the army since we only keep hearing about corporations and their soldiers, so today we're going to learn about the recent history and their organization in the dark future. First off, the history of Cyberpunk does have correlations with our history. You do have the Berlin Wall, which in 1989 was declared non-operational, and that's when basically the destruction of that wall started, which was actually until 1991, and it also signalized the end of the Cold War. But the thing is, the peace didn't last for long because between 1991 and 1992, the US anti-drug bioagent, which was released all over the world, took effect, and the hardest hit were the drug lords of South America, who were the primary suppliers to the US market. That's when those drug lords, with the help of EEC corporations, decided to strike back and attack the DEA on all fronts. Now, it is not known if the Eurocorps actually did business with the cartels, or is it just to basically weaken the US by actually making it harder for them to win those battles. Now, during that time, you had the Gang of Four, which was actually the organization made of NSA, CIA, FBI, and DEA. They were the ones who actually released that bioagent, the anti-drug bioagent, all over the world and caused issues. They basically made decisions that influenced millions of American lives and were kinda running everything in the background. Now, after the cartels attacked the DEA to basically fortify their political positions, they decided for a military action down south to decimate drug lords and their lands. But the thing is, most of those cartels employed guerrilla tactics, and what was happening in Vietnam started happening again. The entire economy of those particular regions depended on drug money, meaning if you were not directly involved in that, you were making money from someone who did. And a lot of people saw that as US taking their livelihood, so decided to strike back as well. That's also when the use of aerodynes became a norm because helicopters and planes were unable to navigate the jungle terrain, so VTOLs were used to actually aid the military and became mostly airborne in that area. But then, since the collapse of 1995 happened, well, the country's economy, the US economy, was decimated and millions of people were left homeless, so the army was slowly pulled from that war to establish a military rule, or well, the martial law, across US to try and bring peace. That's when people started seeing the military as a gang living the high life because, well, the more humane tactics were put aside so that the population could be calmed down. But for example, during the Houston incident, military killed more than 2,000 people via artillery barrage when they refused to turn back from entering Houston since, martial law was put in place. That also had a shoot-on-sight curfew placed in New York and other East Coast cities, so of course, the military was viewed as somewhat being a terrorist organization in a sense. That's also when federal forces clashed with state militias and National Guard troops. Those incidents happened from time to time, like for example, during the Battle of Edwards when Governor E. Brown III got greedy and sent Californian forces to capture Edwards Air Force Base. But with the help of rival Nevadan troops, the defenders of Edwards repelled the Californian assault. After some time has passed though, martial law was revoked, but the time during the martial law wasn't really that nice. You had the plague, which happened in the year 2000, which basically decimated the lands of the US, and they were not doing good. The slow descent of humanity actually started. Now, after the situation started calming down a bit in the States, DEA turned back again to the Central American problem. That's when first cyber soldiers started appearing on the battleground, and they thought that was it, we're definitely going to win this time. But there was a problem. Even though DEA presumed drugs came in from the south, most of them were actually made and distributed within the US under the slogan "Buy American", so the populace saw that this war was about territory, not making the US safe. But again, Eurocorp started funding various armies and troops to fight with the US Army. Their goal wasn't much to decimate the US forces or to decimate the US itself, but to basically destabilize the economy by making the US fight in the war longer. And after 8 years, the US couldn't handle it anymore. The war became too expensive and they decided to pull back. And of course, the Eurocorps basically won. But let's look at the another frontier that the US was interested in: space. During the time when space became interesting to the entire world, the United States Aerospace Force was stripped of its dominance, so they started building up the force to retake that, to retake space. You know who else had that plan? The Neo-Soviet Union's own ESA-assisted space armament plan, and of course, the two powers collided. That's when you had killer satellites, drones, and mines being placed in the orbit, so of course both started destroying each other's gear and scavenging each other's weapons. Now, the ESA itself and the High Riders just watched from the side because it was becoming too dangerous and complicated for them to get involved, so they just kinda left these two to attack each other. The first orbit war was actually the most expensive war, since the highest cost per hour in material being destroyed or expended was 2.98 billion euro dollars per hour. Now, after all of these conflicts, military kinda calmed down a bit. It kinda returned into the background and it still, maintained the power in a sense. Keep in mind, the military is not gone. They're just not that active on the US soil anymore. And in the example of Night City, being a city-state, the US military cannot just stroll in. That's why corpo presence is so big there, and everything is run by the city council. They don't answer to anyone, especially the US president. But keep one thing in mind, military does not play around with corporations. Now, both Militech and Arasaka, being all-powerful, still didn't match the power of the US military, and during the Operation Big Stick, which was against the Mantoga Corporation, the military basically decimated every HQ, every base this corporation had with an artillery strikes, personnel on the ground, but the pinpoint strikes destroyed every building they had. And that was the clear example what happens if a corporation gets out of line and pushes the US government too far. And look, a lot of corporations want to stay in good relationship with the military. Who do you think buys their weapons and vehicles? Not everyone has the budget like the army, so of course corps stayed close to them, especially Militech, because the CEO of Militech is the former US Marine Corps General Lundy. Well, of course, ex-CEO of Militech. Everything which I'm talking about was happening prior and in 2020. Of course, in 2020, as I said, military still maintained its power. You still have the army, the navy, the marines, and the aerospace force. All of those organizations had their roles kinda stay the same, protect the land, the sky, and the coasts of the states. But the problem is, people saw what military was capable of, especially during the martial law times, so the support of military significantly dropped by the general population. That's when this divide between the corporate soldiers and national soldiers happened. Corporate soldiers won't harm people and property like national soldiers because they value it. Meanwhile, the army itself will destroy half of the building because of one sniper, but let's face it, even the corporate soldiers are not going to safeguard you or your buildings, but only the values of their CEOs. But look, the army itself kinda changed. They had their own support and air force now, so they didn't have to rely on the aerospace force. Their general organization stayed the same with divisions, battalions, companies, platoons, squads, and fire teams. And with everything which is happening in the world, one would ask, so could the US Army just stroll in and solve the problems in the states because, everything is in chaos? Well, not really, so the world will stay like that since the US military cannot really go around to conduct peace anymore, at least on the US soil, so at least some level of status quo is maintained in my opinion. If certain things don't occur too much in the states, the military won't get involved, but it doesn't mean if something happened in the states, even in 2077, if something big happened, you can be sure that the entire US military would get involved. So that was the brief history of the military in the world of Cyberpunk. It will be interesting to see what sort of strength they have in 2077. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. A quick announcement, everyone. The Netrunner 2077 community website, created by a fellow community member, is now up. It's one-stop place for all Cyberpunk informations and lore, and you know, it's completely community driven. Check it out, and that's it. If you enjoyed this video, click that like and subscribe button and tell me down below your thoughts on everything I talked about. And of course, join our community on Twitter and Discord. Also, I made a Patreon page. If you were looking for an extra way to support the channel, check it out. And huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters. This is LKM signing out, and stay classy everyone. Bye bye.